Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today for the review of another power station. This is the Aferiy P010. This unit has a 512 watt-hour LiPo4 battery with an 800 watt inverter, excellent UPS function with just a 10 millisecond turnover, and it retails right now for under $500 Canadian, making this a really great value, particularly for a certain application, which is what I'm personally using it for. The question is this the kind of unit that you should be looking for as well? Hopefully I can help you to answer that question as we dive in, and starting by looking at the overall feature set that is here. As noted, this is a 512 watt-hour lithium iron phosphate battery. That is the kind of the most recent battery technology, and it's really favored in these kind of units now because it holds up really well over the long haul. It can do a lot of charge cycles. In this case, it's rated at 3,500 charge cycles to 80% battery capacity. So that's pretty much 10 years of daily full discharges and recharges, meaning that you're going to get a lot of long-term use out of that. And that is reflected, by the way, in the actual warranty here, which is warranted, if you register it, it's warranted up to 7 years, which is really, really impressive for something like this. It has a smart battery management system that helps to protect the battery and also to make sure you're getting the maximum performance out of it. It gives 800 watts of pure sine wave power with a few extra little tricks up the sleeve that we'll note in just a moment. You can see that the overall dimensions this is kind of a moderately sized. It's not the smallest units, but it's a lot smaller than what some of them come. It's a fairly portable unit, weighing in at 6.5 kilos or just right over 14 pounds, meaning this is a good unit to bring along camping applications like that, where it's not going to be too bulky or too heavy to bring along. The dimensions here are 272 millimeters in its length, 230 millimeters in its depth, and 315 millimeters in the overall height. And so that's 10.7 by 9, right over 9 inches by 12.4 inches. One thing that I don't love, we have a fixed handle, which is why the unit's height is measured a little bit higher because there's nothing to fold over. And here at the top, we don't have any kind of a wireless charging pad, which is something I do miss as a part of it. Now, the other thing here on the front is that after we have powered it on, you have to hold about 3 seconds for it to power on. We do have a LED light, and in this case, it's only one setting, just as far as output, and then kind of an SOS type pattern for emergency situations. Now, unlike the recent Bluetti unit that I have reviewed, I don't like the overall button layout here as well because they're kind of all over the place. We've got a button here, button here, button here, button over on the side for the AC output. And so we've got 4 different locations for the actual buttons, plus a 5th location here for the overall power. I like the better organization by Bluetti recently, where they're putting all the batteries together and also having them light up once they're actually active, and so you know what's on and what's off. That's something that is missing here. So as far as the included ports, as already noted, there is no wireless pad, but let's get the other limitation out of the way right off the bat, and that is that there is only one AC outlet. And I'll be frank, this is the first of these units that I've seen with that few. I've seen plenty with 2, but never only 1 before. And so that is definitely a liability. And so there's one 120 volt grounded plug, which is rated for 800 watts as noted previously. You know, they say 800 watts total, but when there's only one plug, that's pretty obvious. Now, what we do have, however, is an abundance of USB ports, and they tend to be really, really good ones, what helps to lead me towards my final conclusion here in just a moment. And so we actually have 2 of USB-A ports, but they're not just USB-A ports. These are QC 3.0, and so that's Quick Charge 3.0, and they're rated at 18 watts, which is a lot of power output for a USB-A port. And then we also have a 100 watt power delivery USB-C port, along with 2 20 watt power delivery USB-C ports. So we have a total of 3 USB-C, 2 USB-A, which is obviously very handy. We also have the 12 volt 10 amp car outlet there. We also have a secondary DC 12 volt output here in the front as well. So a little bit more on the DC front. This is actually, in many ways, it's a better DC unit unit than it is an AC unit for obvious reasons. Now, one thing that I do appreciate is that there is no external power brick, and that is what helps it to have great UPS function that we'll get to in just a second. But you have the traditional kind of computer-looking type plug there on the side, and then also as another input, we have an MPPT style input for solar and or charging from the car. There is no grounding connector that I have seen anywhere on that. What we do have also is a good clear to read screen with percentage readouts for output and input, along with some other messages that are shown on there. And so some nice functionality in that front. There's no wireless functionality that I'm aware of, no Bluetooth or internet capabilities, Wi-Fi capabilities to it. And so you're going to be using this unit hands-on. So you can do a fast charge of up to 600 watts. Now that is a combination of AC and solar. You can charge it in just 1 hour under optimal conditions. Anytime you talk about solar, you're talking about, rather than a fixed figure, it's a moving target, obviously. Probably more practical in most situations, you can charge at a fast rate of up to 400 watts, which means that you can charge from AC alone. You can charge in about an hour and a half. Now, I will note that it does kind of tune things, and so it will charge at 400 watts, kind of the turbo mode, up to 85%. At 85% charge, it throttles down to 200 watts and even a little bit lower as it gets towards 100%. And that is to help the longevity of the battery life itself. So it's actually smart from that perspective. Now, solar input and also then car input, car DC input, is going to be limited at 200 watts through the port there. And so that means it's going to take you about 3 hours to charge via solar under more optimal conditions. If you're less optimal, it could be 3.5 up to 4 hours for charging there. Now, the UPS mode, as already mentioned, is really, really handy here. And so in UPS mode, it will actually allow a flow through of 800 watts in and 800 watts out. And so it's not just charging the battery, it's just pass through. And so then when you change over, it will change over at 10 milliseconds or less. And so that gets me to kind of the primary application that I've been using. I've actually been using this unit for about 3 months at this point, and using it specifically as the UPS for my computer workstation, which is a little on the draw can be a little on the heavy side sometimes for just the typical UPS units. This obviously gives me sufficient power, but also it's a really handy thing to see there. For one thing, it's given me an idea of the actual usage. Actually, it's helped me engaging when to go into sleep mode, when to do permanent shutdown, because I can actually see how much phantom power is being drawn by my workstation. On top of that, I also love having the access to all of those charging ports right there, which just means rather than dealing with other bricks or adapters, you can just charge things right from that. So it's actually a really handy thing to have on the corner of my particular workstation and for my my computer workstation to all be powered through. And there's a lot of things. Obviously, I run a dual monitor setup, a very powerful workstation for editing and all of those things. And so I found it to be really, really useful for that kind of application. So let's talk about some of the tests that I ran with it. So first of all, I like to use, in this case, I didn't try to use my full-size kettle, though as I'll get to in a moment, it probably would run it, though in a limited application. But instead, because it's rated at 800 watts, I used my 900 watt portable tea kettle, and it ran without issue. It pulled kind of its standard draw right at about 600 watts, and it brought the water to boil in about 5 minutes. So not fast, but that kettle is a little bit slower than my other tea kettle because it does draw less current. And so it used about 12% of the battery, just to give you an idea of actual battery usage. Now, things got interesting when I thought, okay, let's try something that's a little bit more powerful, because I was suspecting something was going on there. And so I grabbed a blow dryer that is rated at 1875 watts. And so I thought there's no way it's going to trip this, it's going to shut down. I turned on the blow dryer and it worked. And it kept working. In fact, it ran at 850 watts in that range at a very stable rate, which is obviously more than what this is rated for putting out. There's obviously a little bit more in the tank up above that 800 watt inverter range. So I was curious then, so I went to a powerful 2000 watt unit that I have, and I ran the same blow dryer, and I got a little over 1400 watts of draw. So Bluetti actually has what they call a lift mode. And in this case, this doesn't advertise having something like that, but clearly what it does is that if it is trying to power certain things that are drawing more power than what it is capable of putting out, it will actually throttle back and run things with the battery management at a stable rate that it can sustain. So it's not giving full power. And I did note testing side by side that the blow dryer was not blowing at as high of a motor speed as what it would when I hooked it up to the more powerful unit or straight into AC. So it was running at a throttle down level, but it was running in a stable fashion. Now, I will note with something like that, you need to use caution. There are things like, for example, like my kettles, most things with a heating element like that, it's no problem. If you run them at a lower current, they'll just draw less and it'll take longer to achieve your desired end, but it will do it just fine. Things that have more complex motors, refrigerators, air conditioners, things like that, you probably shouldn't run them that way because it is probably going to just degrade the overall life of the motor. So it probably won't fry them outright, but it will degrade that. And so, you wouldn't want to do that unless you're in an absolute emergency. So just a little caveat on that. For the most part, I would stick with things that are rated that this can actually run in a stable fashion. Now, I also tested two different blenders that I have, one rated at 1,000 watts, one at 1,100 watts. And in both cases, they ran fine. And the 1,000 watt blender, I've seen before that it typically will actually run, it's rated 1,000 watt, but it typically runs a little bit cooler than that, in the 650 or so range, and so it had no problem powering that. My more powerful one, I have seen it draw more, but in this case, I wasn't doing like a huge, heavy smoothie load, and so I don't think it had to work quite as hard, and so it was also able to run stable, and so I had zero issues with either of the blenders. So it's pretty encouraging that most of the things that I typically try to run with something like this, it actually could run, which is better than a lot of units used to be. I also noted in a practical application of actual use over the past 3 months that there have been multiple power outages during that time, brownouts or whatever, where my PC was on, things were running, and it switched over instantly. There was no loss of data, nothing powered down, and so it did work perfectly as a UPS unit, which again is my primary application for it. Now, in terms of charging smaller things, phones, tablets, cameras, things like that, that's fairly effortless at this point. And as you can see, you can recharge those things many times over. And so if you're just going out camping or, in a power outage, just trying to keep some basic electronics powered, even running like your home wireless router, things like that, a unit this size is going to do that quite well for a fairly good period of time. So let's talk about some things I like and some things I don't like as we wrap things up. So things that I like is, as noted, I really like the good number and the variety of the DC ports, particularly the variety of USB-A and USB-C ports, and I appreciate that they tend to be better than average in terms of their power output. I really like the UPS mode. It actually works really, really well on here. And of course, the fact that there's one input and one output as far as AC goes makes it just kind of a natural link in the chain without having, wanting to actually put other things onto AC on it. It really just kind of works for that one application. And then I use it elsewhere as more of a DC unit, just a power bank in that sense. I do think that this is, for this price point, this is a very powerful inverter that could run more than what I expected it to be able to run. I also appreciate the fact that we've got the internalized AC adapter, so no external brick, making it even more portable. I also noted, having basically sitting right next to it for months, is that this thing is really, really quiet. It's a very good desktop companion. Even when the fan comes on, which is very rare, it runs at less than 60 decibels, and most of the time it's essentially silent. The other thing that I did note is that over the time, if it's just doing power pass-through, just in the case of maybe running the LCD screen, just that basic thing, over a long period of time, the power will slowly drop. And I'm talking about weeks, until you get down to about 90%. And at 90%, it actually will charge for a while and bring itself back up to 100%. But for the most part, it's not using any power, it's just passing it through. And so that's a really nice and clean performance there. So those are the things that I like. The things that I don't like the artificial limitation of having only one AC port. So if you're using this during a power outage or using it by traveling and wanting to hook up multiple things, you're probably going to end up resorting to using a power bar. And that's one of the things I think we're trying to avoid in situations like this. So I don't like that. I wish that there was the wireless charger. Again, this being kind of a desktop unit is the way that I'm using it. I really like having that as an option to throw a phone on there and to get some charge in that way. I also don't like the way that the power buttons are spread out, and in particular that comes to the AC adapter side. On the AC output, it's way over here on the side, and so I find it kind of hard to reach to, and so you have to kind of find it in some situations by feel because it's not front based, and so typically when you're facing it, that's what's going to get the most light and the most visibility. And so if you have things hooked up and you're trying to reach at that, trying to find that and then turn it on, and those not lighting up to give you a kind of a positive affirmation that they're running. Those are things that I wish would change. And so my conclusion is I like this best as a workstation UPS. The great variety of USB ports makes it a great place to charge things and to know that I'm getting clean power to my PC and monitors and all of that. And then also to know that if there's a power outage, I'm not going to lose my important work, and I'm going to have plenty of time to either continue to work or to, under my control, shut down the workstation without having to have it just crash because of a power outage. Now, the fewer AC ports does make it less practical than some other competitors when it comes to just a backup unit for a power outage type situation, and so you might want to evaluate for that. I think that it's a very strong value at under 500 Canadian dollars and roughly the same. I think you can get it even cheaper than that in the US market depending on the sale price. But that's very strong value for an 800 watt inverter. It can actually run a fair number of things, and so that makes it a really strong value for that kind of application as well. This doesn't necessarily have a lot of bells and whistles in terms of wireless connectivity and things like that, but it is a solid unit, and one I think that in many ways makes more sense as an indoor unit. It's not particularly weather sealed that I know of, and so I really like it for the application I'm using it. There are other units that I like better for more outdoor type applications. I'm Dustin Abbott, and if you look in the description down below, you can find linkage to my text review and also some buying links if you want to get more information or are interested in purchasing. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and let the light in.